share my screen. Okay, so if you look at the cross section, what I'm using as my typical wall section has already been bubbled out as a call out. And then I called out, once I did my typical wall section, I called out 3 different areas that we're going to show in even more detail. And so your job for this week on this project is to fill this out and annotate it, fill out all the detail elements, annotate it, and then annotate these 3 typical conditions here. And they're all shown on this one sheet. So you're going to turn in this sheet as part of this assignment. But it's going to be all completed and annotated. So let's go ahead and look at the assignment, which is right here. So let me get this bigger so everybody can see it. So I want you to really detail that typical wall section from the bottom of the footing to the top of the roof. And you're going to use detail lines and detail elements off of Revit to put in there. So I want to see the trusses. I want to see the subfascia. I want to see a continuous soffit vent strip. I want to see attic insulation and a continuous vent channel. Wall to include top and bottom plates and bed insulation. At the floor, I want to see a side wood I-joist detail element and a 1¼ inch LSL, that's called laminated strand lumber rim joist. So really, when you look at how that, I've got some visual aids here. This is one of those 1¼ inch laminated strand lumber. It sits on my plate on my wall, and then my wood I-joist is the same height of that and dives into it. So you're going to see this in elevation and this in section. Okay, what else we got to do here? I want you to detail the deck connection because that's actually one of the more complicated and critical connections. So where that wood, I put a wood deck on this house. And I haven't shown any detail to how that deck actually connects up against the house. Did any of you find any deck collapses when we did our structural failure case study in the last collapse? I don't know if any of you did them, but they're fairly common. They've happened in Winona. They've happened here in La Crosse. I think they happened in Alaska once. And what happens is people have a party and their deck is packed. And then these bolts that hold the deck onto the house, onto the rim joist, rust out. And the whole thing collapses back down against the house. So I gave you on Blackboard here. I gave you something to read right above the assignment. It's called Deck Connection Thalen. So this is one of our textbooks that we used to have, and it's got a detail for how to do that deck connection. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One of them applies to our condition. I'll let you figure out what that is. But basically, you're going to draw something like this in Revit and call it out in Revit on that detail. If you find a better one or a one you like better on the internet, you're welcome to go ahead and use that. So when a lot of people talk about detailing a building, this is the part they're talking about, where you really get into the nuts and bolts and the fine detail of how this thing actually goes together and how do we keep it so that water doesn't get into the house and how it's structurally functional. So this is really kind of your quote, your first quote unquote detail. When people talk about do a detail for that, they're probably typically talking about something like that. We got to figure out how this deck connects to the house. So let's go back into the assignment. We want a 2x6 pressure treated sill plate with anchor bolt as per code. We want 2 inches extruded polystyrene rigid insulation over a waterproof membrane at the exterior of the foundation wall. The exposed insulation above grade is covered with an acrylic exterior insulation finish system. Finish on it. We want 2 number 4 rebar continuous in the footing. So if it's continuous, what does that mean? It's coming in and out of the page, so you're just gonna draw two little circles, right? But then we want a 12-inch long number 4 rebar at 4 feet on center that goes into the footing and it connects the footing and the foundation wall. We want a 4-inch perforated interior and exterior and interior perimeter drain tile that drains to a sealed radon sump pit in the basement. So all we're gonna do is show them an exterior and interior perimeter drain tile, but your note's gonna say that it drains to a radon sealed sump pit and basement. Now, I could have done all this work and showed you this and say, just copy that, but I want you to actually look these things up on the internet, look them up on other drawings, see what they actually look like on the plan. And a 1/2-inch expansion joint at the perimeter of the basement slab. So the way we roll with this on Revit is we do all our drawing on the typical wall section. So all the detailing, all the drawings and everything are done here. Then what we do is we make something called the detail group. And so it's all this stuff we've added in to kind of quote unquote pimp out or finish out this typical wall section. That's all grouped together. And then since that stuff is view specific, we can copy and paste that group into our like footing call out. And it'll come in exactly the right location and it'll look exactly correct. So let me show you a quick video on how that all works. So let me get back to the assignment and I've been gotta get this out of my way here. I'm watching the stock market way too much because I'm wondering how much money I'm losing. I just sold like $3,000, $4,000 of stock over my lunch hour because I'm like, I'm worrying about this too much. I'm gonna cut some of these stocks. Like I had Japanese stocks and they went down like 8% in one day. And that's a hit. You sold all your stocks? Yeah, you know, what I really think you should do is sports betting. That's how you're gonna get to a good retirement. No, just kidding. Okay, so let's, on what?
Always done. Always done.
Okay, let's get back into this, what was I even talking about? Oh, yeah, we're gonna watch this tutorial video here. Okay, so let's get the sound up enough so I can actually hear it here, so give me a second. I can't blame it on Josh Vandenberg anymore. I always used to blame him when something was screwed up with my computer. Okay, here we go. Talk about which are a way to group all the detail elements that, so like if I turn the section, the model off on my typical wall section here, you can see there's a bunch of stuff I've added to make it look like how it would actually be constructed. And I want to take that and make it a group first off, so I can move it around without selecting all the stuff individually. And then secondly, I can take that group and copy and paste it like into these call outs. And then I want it to constantly do those detail elements over and after. Once I fix one in the detail group, it'll fix it everywhere I paste it into. So let's go back in and I'm gonna keep this not display model for now. You're still on making details. So the first thing I want to do is just highlight the parts that I want to begin with what's called a filter tool. So I want to keep the detail line. I don't want to keep the level. I want to keep the line. I don't want to keep the text notes, and I don't want to keep the. So I did okay. So that just is a fast way to just select what I'm looking for. Now what I want to do is go to annotate and then click on detail group and create a group. We're going to call this wall section. Okay. So now you see what happens when I click on that. I can edit that group And it's just like editing a roof outline or whatever, finish or cancel, but I can grab that group and move it wherever I want, and it's all gonna take it together. So the beauty part of this is I can copy and paste it into the call log detail that I did, and it'll all come in there. So I'm gonna go back here and turn my model back on. So this is the detail that we're calling out of that. So when I look at that detail here, let's click this and open it up. See, so those detail elements, since they're view specific, they don't come in here. So I'm gonna get this here. Now, the beautiful part is I can take that detail group I just made, so if I highlight that, I can copy that. And then I can come in here and I can paste it, and what I wanna do is paste align to current view. And voila, it comes in exactly where it needs to be, and so I don't have to copy that all over when I do a detail. Now I want to show you the best trick of all. Since that detail group is kind of like an X or a block in AutoCAD, where once you change one, it changes all of them. So I want to say, let's say I want to do an X on my rim board here, so it looks more like a piece of wood than just this blank rectangle. I'm going to click on that detail group. I'm going to go to edit group. I'm gonna go in and put a detail line in, and I'll just do a dim line this time. And I'm gonna go ahead and draw in my X there. And I'm gonna finish that group. So now you see it shows up here, but since we edited that group and it was in the call out, it now also shows out in the call out. Okay, I hope this helps. Thank you. Okay, so let's get back into the assignment. Let me close that. So I want you to, once you draw the typical wall section, you draw all the stuff, I want you to annotate it. And I'm not telling you what the typical roof construction note should be. You're gonna have to come up with it by yourself. You know that it's got asphalt shingles, you know it's got underlayment, you know it's got, based on what the Revit model is, you should come up with your typical wall note on here. So I want you to use the typical roof construction note, a typical exterior wall construction note, a typical floor construction note, a typical basement wall construction note, and a basement slab construction note. So all those are going to be noted on my typical wall section here. Okay, so, and you're going to have other notes that might be needed, but that typical note should cover most of that stuff. Then what's going to happen is when you start annotating on this sheet here, so all the typical wall section notes, and this is drawing one on sheet A302. When you get to this part here, you're going to just say typical wall construction. And then underneath that line, instead of listing everything, you're going to see, you're going to say, see drawing 1/A302. Because that way, if you change this note on one of A302, you don't have to change it every place it's located somewhere else. Because like, for the sake of argument, these could be on another sheet. We don't want to have to find all the various places we copied that typical wall construction note and redo it, where we can refer them back to the typical wall section. Now, there's one last thing I want to talk about. When you make a call out, by default, it doesn't let you put, so let me just go back to the typical wall section. So I'm going to show the crop region, even though I've got it turned off. Okay. So this is my crop region. So if I say I start to annotate this, so I'm going to put a text note on here with a leader. And I'm going to just type some gibberish and hit enter. So that one showed up, and the reason it showed up was that when you go back to this note here, oh, sorry, I screwed this up. So there's what happens sometimes is when you annotate these detail notes and these things, the text will not show up if your annotation goes outside of this crop region. And if that happens, that's the dotted line here. So let's try it on this one, see if it works better. Okay, so here's my crop region. And then the dotted line is the annotation crop region. And so that annotation crop region on the other one was so big, even, let's try this example one more time. So we're gonna do a text. We're gonna get my text way out here outside of the annotation crop region. And it won't show up. And the reason is it's outside that annotation crop region. So in order, if that does happen to you, what you can do is go to this view and you turn off annotation crop. And then you'll notice that when you highlight this, that little dotted line doesn't show up. And now that text did show up, even though it was outside the annotation crop. So that's just a little hint on that. So when the annotation crop is on, it puts all these notes out that are outside that annotation crop box out. And when it's off, they show up no matter where they are. Okay, so let's undo. I'm going to just erase that because I don't want this on this drawing here. Let's go back into the assignment. So anything that you're going to call out on sheet A302 should be detailed on these sheets. So like when we show that expansion joint, we would not call out that 1/2-inch expansion joint at the edge of the slab on the, let's go to here. That 1/2-inch expansion joint is going to be shown here, but we don't have a note calling it out here because we've got a bubble, and that proper place to call that out is when it's shown at a larger scale where that bubble is. So that note on that 1/2-inch expansion joint is going to be shown there. If I've got the interior and exterior drain tile being drawn on here, I'm not going to call them out on the typical wall section because the purpose that I'm doing this detail call out is I can show more detail at a larger scale. So I'm going to call those out on this one here. Okay, so let's go back in. So refer back to typical wall construction notes on typical wall section as required. So don't copy that entire typical wall construction note. Say typical wall construction, see drawing 1 of sheet A302. I want to see a roof pitch symbol. I want to see a break line family on these details. And then the one thing I'm doing different on this one, I'm having you print out a hard copy because I want you to see what this actually looks like. I know there's been some question what size text. I want you to use 332nd text for all these annotations. And we're going to print out hard copies of these because I want you to see what they actually look like at full scale. So I want you to print out a 2-scale hard copy. We're going to need a thumb drive. I've got one up here. So just let me know when you're done with this and you're ready to do your QCR. And then you're going to quality control review and red mark it. And then this is like what happens in an office. Once you do your red marks, you're going to use a highlighter or cross them out. And you're going to turn in that QCR sheet as part of this assignment. And we're also going to do a peer critique in one of the later classes in this week. So then at the end of this project, you're going to turn in the PDF of sheet A302 once it's all done to Blackboard. And you're going to give me the red mark QCR hard copy. So let's see how you're being graded on this. So doing the detail lines and detail groups on the typical wall section is 7 points. Drawing up the deck connection detail is a point all by itself. Doing a detail group and then using it is for 1 point. Annotating typical wall section correctly is 4 points. Annotate details, referring back to typical construction notes is 4 points. Dimension overhang and heel height on detail is 1 point. That's obviously for the roof. Using the break line family and roof pitch symbols on details, that's a point. And then turning in your red mark QCR copy is a point. And this is the only thing you're working on this entire week in this class. Okay. Any questions? Okay, I'll let you get started on it. Thank you.